Still, the cold concrete seeped through my blanket when my son said, "Sleep in the garage, we need the room." As I nodded and smiled, I kept my hands steady, refusing to give him the reaction he expected. While the heater clicked weakly beside me, that sound grew louder than his laughter upstairs. The same cold followed me into the morning, into his silence, into the way he asked for money, like nothing happened. That's when I realized respect wasn't lost. It was something I'd been giving away. Still feeling that cold, I called the realtor and let consequences warm the house instead. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? I hope your day's gentle and calm. Please like, subscribe, and let's start our story together. Christmas Eve was supposed to feel warm. That was what Tom Harrington told himself as he stood at the head of the dining table, hands resting on the polished wood he'd refinished himself years earlier. The house glowed with soft yellow lights. A real tree filled the living room with the sharp scent of pine. Becky had spent the entire day cooking, moving between the kitchen and dining room with forced cheer, determined to preserve tradition no matter how strained things had become. For Tom, this dinner felt like a test, one last chance to believe that retirement hadn't turned him into a stranger in his own home. Max sat across from him, slouched low in his chair, one leg bouncing beneath the table. His phone never left his hand. Every few seconds, the screen lit his face, pulling his attention away from the food, the conversation, the family. When Becky asked about his plans for the new year, Max gave short, distracted answers without looking up. When Olivia tried to joke about childhood Christmas disasters, Max smirked, thumbs still moving. Tom watched all of it quietly, feeling a familiar knot tighten in his chest. Halfway through dinner, Max cleared his throat, still staring at his screen. "So, he said casually, "I've got a couple friends coming by tonight. Just crashing. Nothing big." Tom nodded, trying to stay relaxed. "That's fine," he said. "House is big enough." Max finally looked up, eyes sharp, calculating. "Yeah, about that," he said. "We'll need your room." The words hung there, awkward and unfinished. Tom chuckled, lifting his glass. "Good one," he said. "Almost got me." Max didn't smile. Instead, he leaned back, arms crossed. "I'm serious. You can sleep in the garage. It's heated. Just for tonight." The laughter died in Tom's throat. He looked at Becky, waiting for her to laugh too, to shut it down, to say this was some tasteless joke. Her smile faltered instead. She glanced between father and son, lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. "You're not serious," Tom said, his voice keyeder now. Max shrugged. "It's Christmas. I don't want my friends sleeping on couches like losers. You're not even using the room for anything important." Something shifted in the room, an invisible pressure pressing down on everyone at the table. Olivia straightened in her chair, eyes wide. Becky reached for her napkin, folding it, unfolding it, her movements frantic. "Max," Becky said softly, "maybe we can figure something else out." Max sighed loudly, as if inconvenienced. "Why does everything have to be a discussion?" he snapped. "It's one night. He's retired. What does it matter?" Tom felt heat rise behind his eyes. He searched Max's face for hesitation, for shame, for any sign this was a mistake. There was none. Just impatience. Just entitlement. "Fine," Tom said suddenly, the word surprising even himself. He stood slowly, chair scraping against the floor. "I'll manage." Becky's head snapped up. "Tom, it's okay," he said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack. "Let the kids enjoy Christmas." Max nodded once, already reaching for his phone again. The issue settled in his mind. Tom walked away from the table without another word. He grabbed a pillow and an old blanket from the hall closet, each step heavier than the last. The garage smelled of oil and cold concrete. He flipped on the light, revealing boxes stacked with years of forgotten tools and holiday decorations. The heater hummed weakly as he laid the blanket on a narrow cot he hadn't used in years. When he finally lay down, staring up at the unfinished ceiling, the house above him buzzed faintly with laughter and music. Tom's chest tightened, not from the cold, but from something deeper. He replayed the dinner again and again, wondering when respect had turned into dismissal, when his son had stopped seeing him as a father and started seeing him as an obstacle. As the hours crawled by, sleep refused to come. Tom lay awake, staring into the dark, asking himself a question he'd avoided for years. Had he failed Max? Or had he waited too long to stop letting him fail himself? Morning came quietly, without apology. Tom woke stiff and sore on the narrow cot in the garage, the hum of the heater clicking off and on like a tired heartbeat. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the smell of oil and cold metal brought everything back. The dinner, the table, Max's voice telling him to sleep out here like he was excess furniture. Tom sat up slowly, rubbing his face, bracing himself before stepping back into the house. Inside, Christmas music played softly, as if nothing had happened. Max stood at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee, laughing at something on his phone. He didn't look up when Tom entered, didn't say good morning, didn't acknowledge him at all. Tom waited. 1 second. 2. Then he cleared his throat. Nothing. Max walked past him, shoulder brushing close, eyes already back on his screen. It was deliberate. The message was clear. Last night was over, and in Max's mind, it didn't deserve another thought. Tom felt something sink in his chest, not anger yet, but humiliation, the kind that makes you feel smaller in your own home. Becky busied herself at the stove, stirring eggs that were already done. She kept her back to Tom as she spoke. "I made extra," she said carefully. "You can eat before it gets cold." Tom nodded, though his appetite was gone. He sat at the table alone while Max grabbed a plate and disappeared into the living room. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was heavy, intentional. Later, Becky finally sat across from Tom, hands folded tightly. "Let's not turn this into something bigger than it needs to be," she said. "It's Christmas." Max didn't mean it the way it sounded. Tom looked at her, really looked at her. He meant it exactly the way it sounded. She sighed, eyes tired. "He's under a lot of pressure. If you push back now, it'll just make things worse. Sometimes peace costs a little pride." Tom stared down at his untouched plate. Pride, that was what she thought this was about. Not respect, not boundaries, just pride. "I'm done paying for his mistakes," Tom said quietly. Becky's head snapped up. "What?" "I'm done," he repeated. "No more covering his rent. No more temporary loans. No more rescuing him when things fall apart." Her face tightened with worry. "You don't mean that." "I do." By midday, Olivia called. Her voice was gentle, careful, like she was stepping onto thin ice. "Mom said things were tense," she said. "Dad, are you okay?" Tom hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "I slept in the garage, Liv." Silence. Then, "He asked you to?" Tom didn't answer. "He didn't need to." "That's not okay," Olivia said. "But cutting him off completely, are you sure that's the answer?" "I've tried everything else," Tom replied. "And he keeps taking." That afternoon, Max finally spoke to him. Not an apology, not even acknowledgement of the night before. "I need you to co-sign something," Max said, leaning against the doorframe of Tom's study. "It's for a new venture, real opportunity this time." Tom looked up slowly. "You're asking me for money," Max scoffed. "Support. Same thing you've always done." Tom felt the final thread snap. He saw it clearly. Now the garage wasn't the insult. This was the expectation that nothing had changed, that he would always step aside, always pay, always absorb the disrespect. "I'm not helping you," Tom said. Max's expression hardened. "You're serious?" "Yes." For the first time, Max looked unsettled. Angry, but unsettled. He muttered something under his breath and walked away. Tom sat alone in his study long after, staring at the closed door. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that this wasn't just another argument. This was a line being drawn, one that would decide what kind of relationship they would have from this day forward, or whether they'd have one at all. The confrontation didn't come with shouting at first. It came with paperwork. Tom was sitting at the dining table, sorting through old folders, insurance documents, tax records, things he'd put off organizing since retirement when Max dropped into the chair across from him like the house still belonged to him by default. Max slid a folded sheet of paper onto the table, tapping it with 2 fingers. "I've been thinking," Max said. "About the future?" Tom didn't look up. "That's new." Max ignored the comment. "When you and Mom are gone, the house should be split differently. I mean, I'm the one who's going to need it. Olivia's got her own life." Tom finally raised his head. What are you talking about? I should get a bigger share, Max said plainly. It only makes sense. The words landed heavier than Tom expected. Not because they were surprising, but because of how easily Max said them. No hesitation, no shame, just assumption. You're already counting what you'll get? Tom asked. Max shrugged. I'm being realistic. You always said this place was our legacy. Well, legacies go to the ones who actually stay. Tom felt something fracture inside him. He'd built this house with his own hands, worked overtime for decades to keep it, protected it through recessions and layoffs. And now his son was treating it like an overdue payout. This isn't a negotiation, Tom said, his voice tight. Max leaned forward. It should be, especially if you're planning to start acting distant. That did it. Tom pushed his chair back and stood. His patience, already thin, finally gave way to something colder and more dangerous clarity. You don't get to demand rewards for disrespect, Tom said. And you don't get to plan your life around what you think I owe you. Max's eyes narrowed. So that's it? You're cutting me out? Tom didn't answer, not because he didn't know what he wanted to say, but because he knew if he did, there would be no going back. That afternoon, Tom sat in his car with the engine running, phone pressed to his ear. Grace answered on the second ring. Tom? She said. Everything okay? No, he replied. But I need you to do something for me. They talked for nearly an hour. About the market, about timing, about what it would mean to let go of a house that held decades of memories. When Tom hung up, his hands were steady. His chest wasn't. Still, the decision felt right in a way nothing had for weeks. Inside the house, Max watched him carefully. Too carefully. You've been making calls, Max said later that evening. What's going on? Tom met his gaze, measured and calm. Just handling some things. Max studied him, suspicion flickering behind his eyes. You're not planning something stupid, are you? Tom didn't respond. Silence was safer than truth. Becky found out that night. She stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter as Tom told her he'd contacted a realtor. You're selling the house? She whispered. Yes. Her eyes filled instantly. Tom, this is our home. I know. What about Max? Tom looked away. That's exactly why. Becky shook her head, tears slipping free. You're reacting out of anger. This will destroy what's left of the family. No, Tom said firmly. What's destroying this family is pretending nothing's wrong. She begged him to slow down, to think, to wait until after the holidays. But Tom had already waited years. Waited through excuses, through bailouts, through nights of disappointment he never voiced. I'm not backing down, he said. Max needs to learn that actions have consequences. Becky fell silent, staring at the floor as if bracing for an earthquake. Upstairs, Max paced his room, unease growing with every unanswered question. He didn't know what Tom was planning, but for the first time in his life, he sensed something slipping out of his control. And Tom, lying awake that night, knew he'd crossed a line of his own. Whatever came next, there would be no undoing it. The listing went live 2 days after Christmas. Tom stood in the living room while Grace walked him through the photos on her tablet, wide shots of the front porch trimmed in snow-dusted garland, the fireplace glowing softly, the dining room table set as if another family was already waiting to move in. Each image felt like a memory being quietly packed into a box. Tom felt it in his chest, that familiar pull of regret, but beneath it was something else too. Relief. The kind that comes when a decision finally stops living in your head and starts existing in the world. Upstairs, Max felt the shift before anyone said a word. The house didn't sound the same. Conversations lowered when he entered a room. His parents exchanged looks they never used to share. When Grace stopped by just to check something, Max hovered at the top of the stairs, listening, watching. He started asking questions that no one answered directly. What's with the realtor? He asked Becky that evening. She's a friend, Becky replied too quickly. Max didn't buy it. He began pacing, scrolling through listings online, searching for something he couldn't quite name. A knot of paranoia tightened in his gut. Something was happening, and he wasn't in control of it. Tom decided not to wait any longer. He found Max in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, suspicion already etched across his face. Tom didn't raise his voice. He didn't soften it either. I'm selling the house, Tom said. For a second, Max just stared at him. Then he laughed a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You're bluffing." "I'm not." The laughter vanished. "You can't do that." "I already did." Max's face flushed red. "This is about me sleeping in the garage, isn't it? You're really going to burn everything down over that?" "No," Tom replied evenly. "This is about years of disrespect." That was just the moment it became impossible to ignore. Max slammed his hand on the counter. "You're abandoning your family because your pride got hurt." Tom felt the words land, heavy and deliberate. "I'm protecting what's left of it." Becky rushed in, eyes wide, hands trembling. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "We can talk about this. There's still time." "There's been plenty of time," Tom said. "Too much." Olivia stepped between them before Max could say something worse. "Max," she said, calm but firm, "this doesn't have to end like this. Apologize. Own what you've done." Max scoffed. "I'm not begging him. No one's asking you to beg," Olivia said. "Just take responsibility." But Max wasn't listening anymore. He looked at Tom like a stranger, like an enemy. "You're doing this to control me," he said. "You always have." Tom shook his head slowly. "I'm doing this because I won't be treated like I'm disposable." The room fell silent. Christmas lights blinked softly in the corner, oblivious to the wreckage forming beneath them. Max grabbed his jacket. "Fine," he snapped. "Sell it. See how that works out for you." He stormed out, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. The house felt hollow after he left. Becky sank into a chair, tears finally spilling. Olivia stood quietly, unsure who to comfort first. Tom remained standing, staring at the door, his reflection faint in the glass. For the first time since making the call to Grace, doubt crept in. Not enough to undo the decision, but enough to hurt. As the Christmas lights continued to glow, Tom wondered if he'd just lost his son, or if this was the only way to finally save himself. The email arrived just after sunrise. Tom was sitting alone at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee he'd already forgotten to drink, when his laptop chimed. The sender made his stomach tighten before he even opened it. Martin Feldman, CPA, the accountant who had handled the family business for nearly 2 decades. The subject line was short, professional, and quietly devastating. Urgent. Irregularities discovered. Tom read it once, then again. By the third time, his hands were shaking. The message was clinical, almost polite, which somehow made it worse. Over several years, small amounts had been withdrawn from the business account. Nothing dramatic at first. Then, larger transfers. Patterns that only became visible when viewed together, all traced back to Max. Expenses labeled as operational costs. Consulting fees. Temporary reimbursements never returned. Tom leaned back in his chair, the room spinning slightly. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. He thought of every time Max had asked for help. Every excuse. Every promise that things were about to turn around. Tom had believed him. Worse, he'd defended him. By noon, Tom had called Max and told him to come home. Max arrived irritated, already on edge. "What now?" he said, tossing his keys onto the counter. "You done punishing me yet?" Tom opened the laptop and turned it toward him. "Sit down." Max didn't. His eyes flicked to the screen anyway, scanning the highlighted rows of numbers, the dates, the totals. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" Max asked. "You tell me," Tom said, his voice low. Max scoffed. "You're seriously trusting some spreadsheet over your own son?" Tom clicked open the attachments, bank statements, audit notes. A summary written in Martin's careful language. "This goes back years," Tom said. "You've been taking money from the business." "That's not what it looks like," Max snapped. "Then explain it." Max crossed his arms. "I didn't steal anything." Tom stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. "Don't lie to me." Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Max's eyes darted toward the door, then back to the screen. His confidence cracked, just slightly. "It was temporary," Max muttered. "I was going to put it back." "When?" Tom demanded. "After the business collapsed?" Max's shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him, replaced by something closer to resentment. "I needed it," he said. "You never gave me room to build anything of my own." Tom laughed once, sharp and humorless. I paid your rent, your car, your debts. And I hated it, Max shot back. I hated needing you. I hated feeling like a failure every time I asked. So you robbed me? Tom said. I borrowed, Max said weakly. You wouldn't have even noticed if things worked out. That was the moment something inside Tom finally broke, not explosively, but cleanly, like a snapped wire. He saw it all now. The late nights he'd stayed up worrying, the bailouts disguised as help, the boundaries he'd never enforced because he thought love meant endless patience. I enabled you, Tom said quietly. Max didn't deny it. Tom turned away, pressing his palms into the counter, breathing through the anger burning in his chest. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier, but colder. This ends now. Max looked up, alarm flashing across his face. What does that mean? Tom didn't answer. He picked up his phone and stepped into the other room, closing the door behind him. Grace answered on the first ring. I want to move fast, Tom said. No delays. As he ended the call, Tom rested his forehead against the wall. The decision was made, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning. Behind him, the house was silent. And for the first time, Tom wondered not just how much Max had taken, but how much damage still hadn't come to light. Max didn't call right away. 3 days passed after the confrontation, days filled with an unfamiliar quiet that settled heavily over the house. Tom kept himself busy with paperwork and small repairs, anything to keep his mind from replaying the accountant's email and Max's hollow justifications. He told himself the distance was necessary, healthy. Still, when his phone finally buzzed with Max's name, his chest tightened despite his resolve. I just need you to hear me out, Max said when Tom answered. His voice was lower than usual, stripped of its edge. Please. They met at a small cafe halfway between the house and the office Max used to rent. Neutral ground. Tom chose a corner table and arrived early, unsure whether this was another manipulation or something different. When Max walked in, he looked thinner somehow. Shoulders slumped. Confidence dulled. I've got an idea, Max said after they ordered. A startup. Something I can actually build on my own. Tom folded his hands together. You said that last time. I know, Max replied quickly. This is different. Tom didn't interrupt. He let Max talk, watching carefully for the signs he'd learned to recognize: deflection, blame, exaggeration. Instead, Max hesitated, then exhaled. I've always felt like I was chasing you, Max said quietly. No matter what I did, it was never enough. You built everything. I just lived in it. The words landed heavier than Tom expected. He felt his anger resist, push back. But something else crept in too. Recognition. You never failed because of me, Tom said. You failed because you wouldn't take responsibility. I know, Max said. And I hate that I stole from you. I hate that I needed you so much. Tom studied his son's face, searching for excuses. There were none this time. Just exhaustion, shame. Back home, Becky listened as Tom explained the meeting. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You don't have to punish him forever, she said. Being strong doesn't mean being closed. Olivia called later that night, voice steady. Whatever you decide, Dad, she said, don't let this break the family completely. Max made choices, but he's still your son. Tom didn't sleep much. By morning, his anger had cooled into something more controlled, more dangerous, maybe, but clearer. He met Max again the following day. I'll help, Tom said. Once. Max's eyes widened with relief. Thank you. Tom held up a hand. You don't get forgiveness with money. You get accountability. Max nodded quickly. Anything. It's a small loan, Tom continued. Documented, transparent. And you admit out loud what you did. No minimizing, no excuses. Max swallowed hard. I took advantage of you, he said. And I won't do it again. Tom leaned back, studying him. The trust wasn't back, not even close. But there was something else there now, a line Max couldn't pretend not to see. This is your last chance, Tom said. If you fail on your own. Max nodded, understanding the weight of it. As they stood to leave, Tom felt a familiar uncertainty settle in his chest. Hope, cautious and fragile, had slipped back in despite everything. Whether it would survive what came next was something neither of them could predict. The warning signs appeared quietly at first. Max stopped giving updates unless Tom asked. Invoices arrived late, then not at all. When Tom reviewed the modest loan documents, he noticed missed milestones Max had confidently promised to hit within weeks. Each time Tom raised the issue, Max brushed it off with vague reassurances, delays, market shifts, bad timing. Always temporary, always fixable. Then came the call. Max didn't ask directly. He never did anymore. Instead, he talked around it, pacing the living room while Tom listened in silence. "Cash flow's tight," Max said. "Not because the idea's bad, just growing pains." Tom leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're asking for more money," Max stiffened. "I'm saying it would help." There it was, the same pattern, dressed up in different words. Tom felt the familiar pull, the instinct to stabilize, to rescue before things collapsed completely. He hated that part of himself, hated how easily it still surfaced. "I told you this was it," Tom said. Max scoffed, turning away.
"So, you're just going to let it fail?"
"I'm not causing it to fail," Tom replied. "Your choices are." Max's jaw tightened. "You've never believed in me." The accusation hit harder than Tom expected. He forced himself to breathe, to stay calm. Belief doesn't mean unlimited funding. Days passed. Deadlines came and went. Each missed promise chipped away at Tom's remaining patience. He watched Max spiral into irritation, then bitterness. Pride kept him from admitting how close he was to losing control, and resentment filled the space where accountability should have been. Becky noticed the tension immediately. "He's trying," she said one evening. "People stumble before they succeed." Tom rubbed his temples. "Or they keep stumbling because no one lets them fall." She flinched at that. "You're talking about your son." "I know," Tom said. "That's the problem." Olivia, more direct, didn't soften her words. "Dad, if you keep saving him, you're teaching him nothing. He has to face the consequences sometime." Tom knew she was right. That didn't make it easier. When Max finally snapped, it was over something small, a delayed payment Tom refused to cover. "You enjoy this," Max said bitterly. "Watching me struggle." Tom's control slipped. "No," he said sharply. "I'm tired of cleaning up after you." Silence followed, heavy, final. "I'm done," Tom said. "No more money. No safety net." Max stared at him, stunned. "You can't just—" "I can," Tom interrupted. "And I am." Max laughed, but there was fear beneath it. "You think this will teach me something? I think it's the only thing that might." Max grabbed his jacket, shaking his head. "Don't expect me to come crawling back." Tom didn't respond. He watched his son leave, the door closing, with a quiet finality that echoed through the house. As the silence settled in, Tom felt the weight of his decision press down on him. He didn't know whether he'd just saved his son or lost him completely. The silence stretched longer than Tom expected. Days turned into a week, and then another, with no calls, no messages, no accidental run-ins. Tom and Max existed in the same city, sometimes even under the same roof, but they might as well have been separated by miles. When Max did come by to grab clothes or mail, he moved quickly, eyes fixed anywhere but on his father. Tom didn't stop him. Pride stood guard where words should have been. Becky carried the weight of it all. She moved carefully through the house, adjusting her tone depending on who was nearby, smoothing over absences with quiet excuses. At night, she lay awake beside Tom, her back turned toward him, tension humming in the space between them. "This can't go on," she whispered one evening. Tom stared at the ceiling. "I know," but knowing didn't change anything. Olivia tried to bridge the gap. She called Tom regularly, checking in, listening without judgment. "He's not doing well," she said gently. "He's angry, but he's scared too." Tom clenched his jaw. "Fear doesn't excuse what he did." "No," Olivia agreed. "But it explains why he's spiraling." Max's anger hardened into withdrawal. He stopped responding to messages altogether. When Tom drove past the old office space Max once rented, he noticed the windows were dark. A "For Lease" sign hung crookedly in the glass. Tom told himself it wasn't his problem anymore, but the knot in his chest said otherwise. At night, memories crept in. Max as a boy, riding on Tom's shoulders. Max's first job, his first failure. Tom wondered when guidance had turned into control, when help had turned into dependency. He questioned every choice, every moment he'd stepped in, instead of stepping back. The business news reached him anyway. Missed payments, lost partners, quiet collapses. Tom felt responsible despite everything, like a man watching a fire he'd helped ignite but refused to put out. One afternoon, Tom stood in the garage, staring at the cot he'd slept on Christmas Eve. The anger he'd clung to felt thinner now, worn down by doubt and guilt. He considered calling Max, replaying the words in his head. I'm sorry. Not for the decision, but for the distance. His phone felt heavier in his hand. What if Max didn't answer? What if he did, and only to confirm the damage was permanent? Tom set the phone down, uncertainty settling in like fog. Somewhere across town, Max sat alone in a half-empty apartment, resentment hardening into something colder. Neither of them knew who would break first, or if breaking would fix anything at all. The call came late in the evening, when Tom had already resigned himself to another night of restless sleep. He almost didn't answer. The name on the screen tightened something deep in his chest. Max. After weeks of silence, the word felt heavier than it should have. Tom let it ring once more before pressing accept. Dad, Max said. His voice was different, quieter, unsteady. Can we talk? They met the next morning in the same small cafe where they'd last spoken as something resembling allies. This time, Max didn't pace or posture. He sat with his hands wrapped around a mug he barely touched, eyes fixed on the table. I messed up, Max said finally. Not just the business, all of it. Tom didn't respond. He waited. I lied, Max continued. I took advantage of you. And when you stopped helping, I blamed you instead of myself. He looked up then, eyes rimmed red. I'm sorry. The apology landed awkwardly, without drama or flourish. That's what made it believable. Tom felt his defenses rise anyway. I don't know what you want me to say, Tom replied. You don't have to say anything, Max said. I just needed you to hear it. Tom studied his son's face, the exhaustion, the weight of failure pressing down on him. The anger he'd carried for weeks resisted letting go, but it softened at the edges. What you did caused real damage, Tom said. To me, to this family. I know, Max whispered. I'm not asking you to forget it. Back home, Becky listened quietly as Tom told her about the meeting. She took his hands, grounding him. Holding on to this anger is hurting you too, she said. Forgiveness doesn't mean you were wrong. Olivia echoed that later, her voice steady and thoughtful. You don't forgive all at once, Dad, she said. You forgive in steps. When Tom met Max again, he chose his words carefully. This isn't a reset, Tom said. It's a test. Max nodded immediately. I understand. There will be boundaries, Tom continued. No money, no shortcuts. And if you slip back into old patterns, this ends. I won't, Max said. I can't. Tom wanted to believe him. Against his better judgment, hope stirred again. As they parted, Tom watched Max walk away, shoulders still heavy but posture straighter than before. For the first time in a long while, Tom felt the faintest sense that something might change. But forgiveness, he knew, was fragile. And the next step would determine whether it survived or shattered completely. The knock at the door came just after noon. Tom wasn't expecting anyone. He opened it to find a woman in a dark coat, badge already in her hand, her expression calm but unreadable. Tom Harrington? She asked. Yes. I'm Detective Sarah Grant. May I come in? The name meant nothing at first. It didn't have time to. Within minutes, Tom was seated at the dining table again, the same place where so many conversations with Max had unraveled, listening as the detective laid out facts that felt unreal in their precision. Max's failed business hadn't just collapsed quietly. It had left damage behind: unpaid vendors, falsified projections, misrepresented funds. Worse, the investigation suggested that some of the early capital had been moved in ways that raised serious red flags. Tom's name appeared in the paperwork. Not as a suspect. Not yet, but close enough to matter. You're saying this could come back on me, Tom said slowly. Detective Grant met his eyes. I'm saying your proximity makes you vulnerable, and your son hasn't been forthcoming. The words hit harder than any accusation. When she left, Tom sat alone, the house suddenly too large, too quiet. He felt foolish, no, reckless, forever believing things had turned around. When Max arrived later that evening, Tom didn't ease into it. Did you know the police were looking into your business? Tom asked. Max froze. Just for a moment. That's nothing, Max said quickly. Just paperwork. People panicking. A detective came here, Tom said. She mentioned fraud. Max's voice hardened.
She's exaggerating.
Tom slammed his hand on the table.
Stop lying to me.
I didn't do anything illegal, Max snapped. Things got messy, that's all. You put my name at risk, Tom said, his voice shaking now. My reputation, everything I worked for. Max looked away. You always make this about you. That hurt more than Tom expected. Becky stepped between them, her voice pleading.
Please, we can handle this calmly.
Handle it how? Tom shot back. By pretending this is another misunderstanding? Max crossed his arms. You're overreacting. The room went quiet. Tom felt something settle inside him, then something heavy, final. I can't do this anymore, Tom said. I can't keep defending you when you won't even be honest. Becky's eyes filled with tears. He needs help, she whispered. I've given all the help I can, Tom replied. And it's never enough. He looked at Max one last time, searching for remorse. There was frustration, fear, but still, no ownership. That night, Tom lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment where he'd chosen hope over evidence. The investigator's words echoed in his mind. Your proximity makes you vulnerable. By morning, the decision had formed not out of anger, but exhaustion. Tom began pulling away. Fewer calls, shorter conversations. Emotional distance, replacing confrontation. Each step felt like tearing something loose inside his chest. He knew what he was preparing himself to do, and he feared it might already be too late to undo the damage Max had set in motion. Max showed up at the house, unannounced, late in the evening, looking like someone who hadn't slept in days. His clothes were rumpled, his face drawn tight with a kind of desperation Tom hadn't seen before. Gone was the defensiveness, the sharp edges. What stood in front of him now was a man at the end of his rope. I don't know where else to go, Max said quietly. Tom didn't invite him in right away. He stood in the doorway, arms folded, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on his chest. Part of him wanted to shut the door, to protect himself from another cycle of disappointment. Another part, the part he'd never been able to silence, stepped aside. They sat across from each other in the living room, the space between them thick with unspoken history. Max finally spoke again, his voice cracking. The legal bills are piling up, he said. I can't keep up. I've sold what I can. I'm out of options. Tom closed his eyes briefly. He'd prepared himself for this moment, but it still hurt more than he expected. I warned you, Tom said. I know, Max replied immediately. And I'm not asking you to fix everything. I need help getting through this. Tom looked at his son and saw the consequences laid bare. No bravado, no manipulation, just fear. Still, anger lingered beneath the surface. Tom thought of the lies, the investigations, the risk to his own name. Helping Max now felt like reopening a wound that had barely begun to scar. Becky joined them quietly, sitting beside Tom. She placed a hand on his arm. He's still our son, she said softly. If we don't help him now, we may lose him for good. Tom stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Mercy came at a cost, and he'd paid dearly before. After a long silence, Tom finally spoke. If I do this, it won't be the way it's always been. Max nodded quickly. I understand. You take responsibility, Tom continued. Publicly, legally, fully. No excuses. No blaming anyone else. I will, Max said. I swear. Tom exhaled slowly. And this doesn't mean things go back to normal. I don't expect that, Max said, his voice barely above a whisper. The next morning, Tom made the call. A lawyer he trusted, someone who wouldn't sugarcoat reality. Sitting in the office later that week, Tom listened as legal terms and potential outcomes filled the room. Consequences, accountability, damage control. Max sat rigid in his chair, absorbing every word. Tom watched him carefully. This time, Max didn't look away. Afterward, driving home, doubt crept in. Tom wondered if he was making the same mistake all over again, confusing love with rescue. He said nothing, but the uncertainty followed him like a shadow. That night, lying awake, Tom accepted a truth he'd been avoiding. He couldn't save Max. He never could. What he could do was stand beside him without shielding him from the consequences. The road ahead was long, unpredictable, and painful. But for the first time in a long while, Tom wasn't walking it blindly. Rebuilding didn't happen all at once. It arrived in small, unremarkable moments that didn't look like redemption at first glance. Max started therapy on a Tuesday morning. He didn't talk about it much, only mentioned the appointment in passing, as if saying it out loud made it more real and more fragile. Over time, the changes became noticeable. He showed up when he said he would. He listened more than he spoke. When uncomfortable truths surfaced, he didn't deflect or lash out. He sat with them. Tom noticed everything. He told himself he was being observant, not hopeful. Trust, once broken, didn't rush back. It crept, and some days, it didn't move at all. Becky allowed herself a different posture. Relief softened her shoulders, loosened the tightness that had lived in her voice for months. "He's trying," she said more than once. "You can see it." "I see effort," Tom replied, "not outcomes." She didn't argue. She knew the difference mattered to him. Olivia stayed gently persistent. She checked in with Max without hovering, checked in with Tom without pushing. "People don't change overnight," she reminded him, "but they don't change at all if no one believes they can." Tom wanted to believe. He really did. But belief felt like exposure now. Max began to take on work that didn't come with prestige. Temporary contracts, long hours, modest pay. He didn't complain. When setbacks came, and they did, he owned them. No excuses, no phone calls asking for rescue. One evening, Tom watched Max repair a broken fence in the backyard. Hands roughened, movement steady. For a moment, Tom saw the boy who used to insist on fixing things himself, even when he didn't know how. The memory caught him off guard. Progress wasn't linear. Some days, Max came home quiet and withdrawn, weighed down by the emotional cost of confronting himself week after week. Tom felt the urge to step in, to offer advice, solutions, something tangible. He resisted. Stepping back was part of the promise he'd made to Max and to himself. Trust remained the hardest part. Tom kept his distance emotionally, watching for patterns, not moments. He tracked consistency, not apologies. When Max slipped, missed a meeting, lost his temper, Tom noted it without reacting. He waited to see what Max would do next, and Max corrected himself. That mattered. Still, Tom wrestled with doubt late at night. He wondered if he'd ever stop bracing for disappointment, whether forgiveness had quietly built a permanent wall between caution and connection. But hope crept in anyway. One afternoon, Max stopped, by unannounced, not to ask for anything, but to share something small. A milestone reached. A breakthrough in therapy he didn't fully understand yet, but felt honest enough to mention. Tom listened, really listened. When Max left, Tom realized he hadn't felt tense the entire conversation. That realization lingered. He didn't rush to celebrate it. He didn't announce it. He simply adjusted just enough to give Max room to continue moving forward. For the first time in a long while, Tom wasn't holding the future in a clenched fist. He was letting it unfold, carefully, cautiously, one step at a time. The call came in the middle of the afternoon, quiet but unsettling. Tom had been reviewing paperwork when his phone buzzed. One missed deadline. That was all it took. A single lapse that dragged him backward, past weeks of cautious progress and fragile hope. Max had promised to deliver a proposal to a small client by Friday. Friday had come and gone. So had Monday. Tom hadn't asked. He'd waited. By Tuesday afternoon, the silence felt familiar in the worst possible way. When Tom finally called, Max answered on the third ring. "I'm behind," Max admitted. "I'm fixing it." Tom closed his eyes. The anger returned quickly, sharp and unwelcome. "You said you were past this." "I am," Max said defensively. "This isn't the same." It sounded exactly the same. After the call ended, Tom sat alone, replaying every warning he'd ignored, every second chance he'd justified. He wondered if helping Max again had been another act of denial dressed up as compassion. Becky noticed immediately. "You're pulling back," she said that evening. "I'm protecting myself," Tom replied. She shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice.
"You can't keep punishing him forever. Progress doesn't mean perfection."
"That deadline mattered," Tom said. "It wasn't optional. And neither is healing," Becky shot back. "You can't demand change and then refuse to tolerate struggle." Olivia approached it differently. She didn't argue. She asked, "What are you afraid will happen if you forgive him fully?" she said. Tom didn't answer right away. The truth felt heavier than anger. That I'll be wrong again, he admitted. That I'll look stupid for believing him. Olivia nodded slowly. Holding on to resentment might protect you, but it's trapping him. The words lingered long after the conversation ended. Then Detective Grant called. Her tone was professional, careful. The investigation is still ongoing, she said. Your son may face formal charges. I wanted you to be prepared. Tom felt the air leave his lungs. Even after everything, the finality of it shook him. Consequences were no longer theoretical. When Tom told Max, there was no argument this time. Just silence on the other end of the line. I'll deal with it, Max said quietly. Tom sat with that sentence longer than he expected. For once, Max wasn't asking to be rescued. That night, Tom weighed his options alone. Support or distance, presence or protection. He realized then that forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was work. Uncomfortable, slow, and uncertain. By morning, his anger had softened, not disappeared, but reshaped. He hadn't decided what he would do next. But he understood something he hadn't before. Healing didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant choosing not to let it decide the future, and that choice was still waiting for him. The lie surfaced quietly, almost accidentally. Tom hadn't gone looking for it. He'd been trying not to. But when a billing statement arrived at the house addressed to Max, unpaid and overdue something, Tom tightened. Max had told him weeks earlier that the issue was resolved, that the matter was closed. It wasn't. Tom sat at the kitchen table long after the house went still, staring at the paper in his hands. He didn't feel anger at first. He felt tired, the kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes every decision feel heavier than the last. When Tom asked Max about it the next morning, Max hesitated. Just long enough. That's old, Max said. It's being handled. Tom didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply asked for proof. Max couldn't give it. The silence between them stretched until it became an answer all on its own. Tom nodded once and walked away. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. That hurt more than any confrontation ever could. From that moment on, he withdrew, not physically, but emotionally. Conversations became brief. Eye contact, rare. The distance grew. Invisible but unmistakable. Becky couldn't contain her frustration anymore. I'm exhausted, she said one night, tears streaming freely. I'm tired of choosing sides. I'm tired of watching this family fall apart. Tom didn't know how to respond. He felt responsible for the fracture, yet powerless to mend it. Olivia stepped in before the damage hardened completely. She spoke to Tom first, her tone calm but firm. If you shut down now, everything collapses, she said. Healing is still possible, but only if you stay present. Max, meanwhile, unraveled. The pressure mounted, his coping mechanisms fraying. Missed appointments, defensive reactions, old habits resurfacing under stress. The spiral was subtle, but unmistakable. The final confrontation came late one evening, when Max accused Tom of never believing in him. I believed in you more than you believed in yourself, Tom replied quietly. And you still lied. Max had no defense left, just anger. The house felt brittle, like it might shatter under the weight of unsaid things. That night, Tom lay awake, staring into the dark, wondering if his resolve had crossed into rigidity. He questioned whether his harshness had done more harm than good. By morning, one truth stood out clearly. Without healing the rift between him and Max, the family would not survive this intact. But how to heal it without losing himself in the process remained painfully unclear. The call came just after midnight. Tom knew it was Max before he answered. He could feel it, the familiar tightening in his chest, the quiet warning his body had learned over months of false hope and slow disappointment. He almost let it ring. Almost. But some part of him still needed to hear the truth, whatever shape it took. I just need a little help, Max said, rushing the words as if speed might make them land softer. Just enough to get through this next part. Tom closed his eyes. The room felt unbearably still. You said that last time, Tom replied. This is different, Max insisted. If I don't cover these fees, everything collapses. I'll lose what little progress I've made. There it was again. The pressure, the urgency. The implication that Tom would be responsible for the fallout if he said no. Tom felt something inside him finally give way, not snapping, but sinking. like a structure too tired to hold itself upright. "No," Tom said. Silence. "No?" Max repeated, incredulous. "You don't even know how much I need." "I know exactly what you need," Tom said, his voice rising despite himself. "And it isn't money." Max's tone sharpened. "You'd rather watch me fail than help." That did it. Tom stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I am done," he said, the anger finally breaking through months of restraint. "I am done enabling this cycle. Every time I help, you sink deeper. And every time, you expect me to save you. I wouldn't need saving if you hadn't." "Stop," Tom shouted. "Just stop." Max went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Raw. Unsteady. "I've never been enough for you," Max said. "No matter what I do, it's never enough." The words hit Tom harder than the accusations ever had. Max's voice cracked as years of resentment poured out, living in Tom's shadow, chasing approval that always seemed just out of reach, failing and feeling watched even in defeat. "I tried," Max said quietly. "And I kept failing." Tom's anger drained, replaced by something heavier. Grief. Regret. He saw it then not just Max's mistakes, but his own silences, his rigid expectations, the distance he'd mistaken for strength. "I gave you everything I knew how to give," Tom said, his voice low but steady. "And you threw it away. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep enabling you." In the doorway, Becky stood frozen, tears streaming freely. "Please," she whispered. "Both of you. You're tearing each other apart." Max turned away, shoulders shaking. Tom remained where he was, heart pounding, knowing the words he'd spoken couldn't be taken back. Later, when the house finally went quiet, Tom sat alone, the echoes of the confrontation replaying in his mind. He realized then that healing wouldn't come from rescuing or rejecting, but from truth, from letting consequences stand, from loving without control. Some wounds, he knew, might never fully close, but as painful as it was, Tom began to accept that loving his son might mean doing so from a distance, at least for now. And whether that distance would bring clarity or permanent separation remained uncertain in the silence that followed. The formal charge arrived in the mail, thin and unassuming, as if the paper itself didn't understand the weight it carried. Tom stood at the kitchen counter reading it again and again, the words blurring together: financial fraud, misrepresentation, court appearance required. This was no longer a distant threat or a looming possibility. It was real. It had a date, a courtroom, and consequences that would follow Max long after the headlines faded. Max didn't argue when he told them. He sat at the table with his hands folded, staring down, absorbing the reality he'd been avoiding. Shame had replaced defensiveness. The room felt heavy with it. "I did this," Max said quietly. "I know." Tom wanted to say something, anything, but anger still lived too close to the surface. He turned away instead, gripping the edge of the counter until his knuckles whitened. Becky followed him later, her voice gentle but firm. "You need to be there," she said, "no matter how angry you are." Tom shook his head. "I don't know if I can sit in that room and watch this." She reached for his arm. "He's already facing the consequences. Don't make him face them alone." For days, Tom wrestled with the decision. Attending the trial meant more than showing support. It meant public exposure. It meant sitting under the weight of judgment, both real and imagined. It meant acknowledging, in front of strangers, that his son had failed in a very public way. The night before the court date, Max called. "I need you there," Max said, his voice stripped bare. "I don't need money. I don't need fixing. I need my dad." The words cut through Tom's defenses. The courtroom was colder than Tom expected. Hard benches, muted colors, the quiet hum of procedural indifference. Tom sat beside Becky, feeling every set of eyes even when none were on him. When Max entered, he looked smaller somehow, more human. The judge spoke. Charges were read, facts laid out without emotion. Tom listened, heart pounding, as his son's mistakes were reduced to timelines and numbers. When the sentence came, it was lighter than Tom had feared. Probation, restitution, mandatory counseling. Relief flickered briefly, but it was quickly overshadowed by the cost it had taken to get there. Outside the courthouse, Max exhaled shakily. "Thank you," he said to Tom, his voice thick with emotion, "for being there." Tom nodded, unsure what to say. As they walked away, Tom wondered whether this moment marked an ending or the fragile beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. The days after the trial passed without ceremony. There were no dramatic apologies, no sudden breakthroughs. Life simply resumed, heavier than before, as if every conversation carried the echo of what had happened in that courtroom. The family moved carefully around one another, aware that while the legal chapter had closed, the emotional one was still wide open. Tom felt it most in the quiet moments. The anger that had fueled him for months no longer burned as hot, but it hadn't disappeared either. It had settled into something dull and persistent, part resentment, part guilt. At Becky's urging, he finally scheduled a therapy appointment. Sitting across from a stranger, Tom surprised himself with how quickly the words came. He talked about responsibility, about control, about the distance he'd always believed was necessary to be strong. Somewhere in the middle of it, he realized how rarely he'd told Max he was proud of him, even when Max was younger, even when he tried. The realization stung. Max began therapy too. He didn't talk much about it at home, but the changes were visible. He spoke more deliberately, listened longer. When he slipped into old patterns, he caught himself sooner. Accountability, once foreign, became a daily practice rather than a forced confession. Becky carried her own weight. She supported both of them. But the strain showed in quiet ways a tired voice, sleepless nights. Years of tension had taken their toll, and she was learning that healing wasn't something she could mediate for everyone else. Olivia remained somewhat distant, but her presence was steady. When she spoke, it was with clarity, born of watching from the outside. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," she told Tom one evening. "It means choosing not to relive the worst moments every day." Tom took that to heart. Slowly, his emotional walls began to lower. He found himself listening to Max without preparing a defense, asking questions without expecting disappointment, feeling compassion where anger once lived. One afternoon, they worked side by side in the garage, repairing a shelf that had collapsed under years of neglect. It wasn't a conversation-heavy moment. It didn't need to be. The shared silence felt different now, less tense, more intentional. "We've got a long way to go," Max said quietly. "I know," Tom replied. But for the first time, neither of them sounded afraid of that truth. The scars remained. Trust was still fragile. But they were moving forward slowly, deliberately, together. And that, Tom realized, was something worth holding on to. The request caught Tom off guard, not because it was unexpected, but because of how it was made. Max didn't arrive with spreadsheets or promises this time. He didn't talk about funding or timelines that sounded too good to be true. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight cutting across the worn wood, and Max spoke carefully, choosing his words with intention. "I'm thinking about starting something new," Max said. "I don't need money. I just want your advice." Tom studied him, searching for the familiar signs: urgency, pressure, the quiet expectation of rescue. None of it was there. For the first time in years, Max wasn't asking to be saved. "What kind of advice?" Tom asked. "Real advice," Max said. "The kind you'd give if I wasn't your son." The honesty in that landed deeper than Tom expected. He nodded slowly and leaned back, letting himself consider the moment for what it was: a shift. They talked for over an hour, not about shortcuts or guarantees, but about risk, patience, and failure. Tom didn't sugarcoat anything. He talked about mistakes he'd made, lessons learned the hard way. Max listened without interrupting, taking notes like someone who finally understood the value of preparation. Becky watched from the doorway, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She didn't say anything, but her expression softened as she listened. This was different, quieter, healthier. Later, she said it aloud. "I haven't felt this hopeful in a long time." Olivia, ever observant, noticed the change too. "Just remember," she told Tom, "healing isn't a finish line, it's maintenance." Tom smiled at that. He understood now. Max's venture moved slowly. There were setbacks, missed opportunities, rejected proposals, but Max didn't spiral. He adjusted. He learned. When frustration surfaced, he talked it through instead of hiding it. Tom felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Pride. Not the kind tied to achievement, but to effort. One evening, as Max packed up his notes to leave, Tom realized something else had changed. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't calculating what might go wrong. He was present. He no longer felt the need to steer every outcome. Max paused at the door. "Thanks," he said simply. Tom nodded. "You're doing the work." As the door closed behind his son, Tom felt a quiet certainty settle in. Max was finally walking his own path. And Tom's role, supportive, watchful, no longer controlling, felt exactly right. Still, he knew better than to call it an ending. It was a turning point. New Year's Eve arrived quietly, without fanfare or expectations. There were no guests, no noise spilling out into the street. Just the four of them gathered around the dining table, the same one that had witnessed so many fractures over the past year. This time, the mood was different. Not light, but steady. The food was simple. Becky moved through the kitchen with an ease Tom hadn't seen in months, humming softly as she set the table. When their eyes met, there was a familiarity there, something rediscovered rather than rebuilt. They didn't need to talk about everything they'd survived. The understanding lived in the spaces between words. Max arrived early, on time. He brought nothing extravagant, just a bottle of sparkling cider and a quiet smile. He looked healthier, grounded. Tom noticed the small things now. The way Max made eye contact, the way he listened before responding. As the night unfolded, conversation drifted naturally. Memories surfaced, some painful, some unexpectedly warm. They didn't avoid the hard parts, but they didn't linger there either. The past sat with them, acknowledged, no longer in control. Tom watched his son and felt something shift again, not surprise, but acceptance. Max wasn't trying to prove himself anymore. He was simply showing up. Later, as midnight approached, Becky reached for Tom's hand under the table. He squeezed back, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had carried them through the worst moments. They had been tested. They were still standing. Max spoke then, his voice steady. "I'm figuring things out," he said. "On my own. And for the first time, that feels right." Tom nodded. It should. When the clock struck midnight, there were no toasts, just a shared breath, a collective sense of arrival at something new. As they sat there, Tom felt the weight of the past loosen its grip. Healing, he realized, didn't mean forgetting what hurt. It meant choosing not to let it define the future. Max lingered as the evening wound down. At the door, he hesitated, then turned back. "Thanks for believing in me," he said. Tom held his gaze. He didn't rush to answer. The words mattered. "I'm still learning how," Tom said. "But I am." As the door closed behind Max, Tom stood quietly in the hallway, reflecting on the year that had nearly broken them and the lessons it had left behind. Forgiveness, he realized, wasn't a gift you gave once. It was a practice. And he was finally ready to keep choosing it. The walk started without a destination. Tom and Max moved side by side through the quiet neighborhood, winter air crisp enough to sting their lungs. The decorations were gone now, houses stripped back to their ordinary shapes, the noise of the holidays replaced by something calmer. Tom liked that. It felt honest. They didn't speak at first. Their footsteps filled the silence, steady and unhurried. "I used to think strength meant never bending," Tom said finally, "never admitting I was wrong." Max glanced at him, surprised. Tom kept his eyes forward. "I thought if I stayed firm, if I kept control, everything would turn out right," Tom continued. "But control isn't the same as guidance, and distance isn't the same as love." Max nodded slowly. "I spent years blaming you," he said. "But I was really avoiding myself." They walked a little farther before Tom spoke again. "Forgiveness isn't easy," he said, his voice measured. "But it's the only way to heal." The words weren't rehearsed. They came from a place Tom hadn't known how to reach before. Saying them out loud felt like setting something down he'd been carrying for too long. Max stopped walking. He turned to his father, eyes steady, no longer guarded. "I don't expect everything to be fixed," he said. "I just don't want to keep living like I'm running from who I was." Tom placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Not firm, not controlling, just present. "You don't have to," he said. Later that evening, the family gathered again. Nothing formal, nothing planned. Becky poured tea. Olivia leaned against the counter, listening more than she spoke. The room felt lighter, not because the past was gone, but because it no longer dominated every breath. There was peace in the ordinary, in shared glances, in small laughter that didn't feel forced. Max talked about his plans work. He was building slowly, deliberately. No shortcuts, No borrowed confidence. Tom listened, not with the instinct to correct, but with respect for the independence forming in front of him. As Max spoke, Tom felt something settle inside his chest. Closure. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet certainty that this chapter defined by control, anger, and regret was ending. The road ahead would still have difficulty. Tom knew that. Healing wasn't a finish line. It was maintenance, choice, effort. But they were no longer walking it alone. Later, as Max prepared to leave, Becky hugged him tightly. Olivia smiled, catching Tom's eye in a way that said, "This matters." Tom walked Max to the door, the night air cool and clear. "I'm proud of you," Tom said. Max paused, absorbing the words without rushing past them. "That means more than you know." As the door closed, Tom didn't feel loss. He felt confidence in his son, and in himself. The past would always be part of their story, but it no longer defined the ending.